Hi, everyone. Welcome back. Thank you for joining us today. We have with us Dr. James Sadler, who is the Director of Research at Baltimore's Promise. For folks who don't know about Baltimore's Promise, it's a collective impact nonprofit that harnesses the power of data and collaboration to achieve better outcomes for Baltimore's youth and their families. So some of us have been really fortunate to work with Dr. Sadler, not specifically on the Youth Data Hub, but on a project called Grads to Careers. Baltimore's Promise has been an amazing partner, so we're really excited for him to join us today. So Dr. Sadler oversees the research agenda of the Baltimore City Youth Data Hub. It's an integrated data system founded by Baltimore's Promise, City of Baltimore, and Baltimore City Schools, and it was established by state legislation in 2022. And it's held up as an example across the country. Like, there's only a few really functional integrated data systems across the country, and we're really excited that we have one here and that it's focused on young people. So James holds a PhD in educational policy from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, Master of Science in Education from the University of Pennsylvania, which he got while he was teaching in a Philadelphia high school. He lives here in Baltimore with his wife and small child and is committed to working for Baltimore's young people. So thank you for joining us today.
Good afternoon, everyone. Hope everyone is warm. I was just telling Dr. Marshall and Dr. Mari about my Christmas break, where I got to spend some time with family in Houston, Texas, and I was able to enjoy such warmer weather. And then yesterday I got a text from my parents that they have multiple inches of snow in Houston, Texas. So no escape. But thank you all so much for spending time. Thank you so much, Dr. Marshall and Dr. Mari, for inviting me to the space to talk to you about the Baltimore City Youth Data Hub. Which is an integrated data system between us, Baltimore's Promise, Baltimore City Schools, and the City of Baltimore, where data and communities come together to support Baltimore's young people. Beth, thank you so much for giving an introduction to Baltimore's Promise. I wanted to a little bit elaborate about what we do and what it means to be a collective impact nonprofit. As Dr. Marshall said, we are a collective impact nonprofit. We're the only collective impact nonprofit in the state of Maryland. We're part of a network called the Strive Together Network, which is a nationwide network of collective impact nonprofits. And recently, we were just designated the highest designation of impact, which is called systems transformation. So what does that all mean? Well, that means that we work to convene stakeholders and break down silos across public and private partnerships with the goal of better understanding the needs of young people along the cradle to career continuum through data and engagement. And that's ages 0 to 24. We're called a neutral convener because we're not immediately associated with any public agency, but that doesn't mean that we're neutral in our values whatsoever. We center racial equity in our work, and we focus on systems and policy change for improved sustainable outcomes. We recently went through a theory of change exercise where we were able to really codify what our beliefs are that drive our work. We believe in the unlimited and boundless potential and talent of youth. We believe that data holds immense power, and that means both for positive change and negative change. We believe in the capacity for systems to change, and that by altering policies and practices, we enhance outcomes for all youth. We also believe in the inherent power, creativity, and expertise of our wonderful Baltimore City community, and in working together as a network to catalyze collective success and foster a more just Baltimore. So I first wanted to talk a little bit about how we work with data, and that second bullet point there, that data holds immense power. And we try not to just collect data about our communities just for collecting's sake, right? We're all about actionable data and make sure that data enacts change. I wanted to just give a couple examples of how we do that as an organization. One of my first projects when I came on board the team in 2020 was to do what's called the Baltimore City Youth Opportunities Landscape, which was to catalog and analyze all of the youth programs in Baltimore City. So merging a bunch of different data sets, which had a lot of different quality. You can imagine Excels and PDFs and screenshots and things like that, putting it in a data set, analyzing what programs are and are not available for our young people. And one of our major findings in our first landscape that we did several years ago was an age gap. We found that there were 4 times the number of opportunities for elementary age children than for young people out of school, and that there was a lack of programming for our older youth. That's a quantitative side. We also had focus groups, and we talked to our young people about what their experiences were, and their data that they provided aligned with these figures as well. They said that they feel less invested by programs in the city as they grew older. And they even mentioned that even for programs that were available for them, they were often inaccessible for reasons such as transportation. We know that our public transportation system in this city is lacking, and things like bus passes usually aren't enough for accessibility. Things like childcare. A lot of our older youth are the primary caregivers of either their own children or their younger siblings. And if they're not allowed to bring these younger siblings to certain programs or events, they won't be able to come. And flexibility too. Our young people are working a lot of the times, and if there aren't any flexible hours to work around that schedule, then they won't be able to participate. So we looked at this data and we knew that there needed to be a stronger investment in older youth programming. And we partnered with a great partner, the Baltimore Children and Youth Fund, who committed $2 million worth of programming for older youth, which increased the funding for those programs by 82%, which meant that the next time that we did this opportunities landscape program, this 4 times figure decreased to 2.3. So using data to enact change, to bring partners together to improve outcomes and experiences for our youth in Baltimore. That's one way. Another way is in the workforce space. So we collaborated with the Baltimore Education Research Consortium, or BERC, several years back to do an analysis on the outcomes of our city schools graduates. And we found from the class of 2009, 26% did not enroll in college and did not appear to be in the Maryland workforce 6 months after graduation. So we often believe that that high school credential is a really important piece to reaching career success, wage success, but we found that for over a quarter of our graduates in the city, that pathway was broken. So using this data and using different data that we got from a lot of different conversations and workforce with our stakeholders, we developed a program called Grads to Careers, which is between collaboration between ourselves, Baltimore's Promise, between city schools, and between the Mayor's Office of Employment Development, that provides free occupational training programs for high school graduates. So a lot of partnership and bringing people together again to hopefully better that pathway from high school graduation to career sustaining wages. And we have seen so far some success. So when we compare the wages of city schools graduates 6 years after graduation, whether or not they achieved a college degree or not, our completers of Grads to Careers have a significantly higher median annual income than those graduates. So we're showing some success that we're increasing the wages for these folks that attend our program. But we're not just resting on our laurels and celebrating these positives, because we know that we have a long, long way to go. Yes, these wages are higher, but $27,000 isn't coming close to a family sustaining wage that we know that our young people believe in. We are also, as Dr. Marshall mentioned, we partnered a lot with the Center of Adolescent Health. And thank you, Dr. Dr. Marshall, and Marina and Rebecca and their entire team. We've been working for years to better understand the health outcomes of our Grads to Career participants. And we see that there's a lot of wraparound supports that are necessary. In just a recent survey of our applicants to this program, 82% of our survey participants were flagged for depression. 68% were flagged for food insecurity, and those figures have increased as time has gone on. So we know there's a higher need, and we recognize that we need to do some sort of expansion to Grads to Careers to better meet the needs of our young people. And to do that, we created a new initiative called Career Bound, which is an expansion that includes the following components. We know that we need to reach young people sooner in the pathway. So we're collaborating more with city schools and our Mayor's Office of Employment Development to make sure that we have more in-school youth apprenticeships. We are continuing our work to grads to careers, but we're adding an alumni track of stackable credentials so that our participants who complete the program can continue training to get even further certificates to better broaden their pathways. We also learned that there needed to be a lot of our young people required some remediation and academic acceleration to even get into the programs, the training programs, even if they graduated. So we're increasing our academic acceleration in both literacy and math post-graduation. And coordinated resources. We're working with our public and private partners to develop more wraparound supports that our young people can meet, which is really, really exciting. So I think, again, our organization is all about data is a powerful tool so long as it's used for action to help our young people. And I think my next example that I wanted to talk about is kind of an example of the limitations of the data infrastructure that we had in the city and why something like the Baltimore City Youth Data Hub was necessary. So I want to talk about our summer systems table work. It's one of my favorite convening spaces that I'm involved with in the city, and it's where we bring together public, private, philanthropic, nonprofit communities that are involved in summer programming in one room together to talk about the upcoming and current summer, where there's discussions on maybe one public organization is having difficulties getting transportation. Well, there's someone in the room that has had that challenge many, many times and has proposed solutions. So that's a great space where there's a lot of sharing of strategies and resources to make opportunities not only more equitable, but more accessible for our young people as well. And we were celebrated or mentioned in the Baltimore Banner a couple of years for our work. And there's also a lot of data sharing that's involved in this table as well. And a lot of organizations that provide data on the opportunities that they are planning on offering young people in the next summer. So last year we had a lot of museums, we had public organizations like YouthWorks and city schools, our organization, the Summer Funding Collaborative, Councilman, now Council President Zeke Cohen, but back then was the councilman for District 1, Rec and Parks, and you name it. And we were still able to do things with those data on where programs are and who they serve. So for example, this is one of the tables that I presented towards the end of, or in the middle of the summer when we had an idea of what the programs that these folks were offering. And we found from year to year, for example, we increased the program capacity that we were able to provide young people, especially an increase in older youth, which we were interested in, but a decrease in middle school programming. So we knew that moving into this summer, we need to do a better job of ensuring that our middle school students had a lot of opportunities as well. We're also able to use this data to create a dashboard, an interactive dashboard on ArcGIS that had where the community, public, private stakeholders, anybody could go online and find out all that they could ever want to know about the opportunities that were available for our young people. And, you know, filters, find out their capacity, find out contact information to get more involved, etc. And while this, while all these products are helpful and we're still able to produce positive change with these data, there's still something that was really limited in the data that we're able to collect. And that's that all this data that I've talked about in the summer systems table is at the program level, meaning that we received information about the programs that are offered, where the programs are, about how much capacity the programs are expected to have, where the program's planning on serving and what age groups, but we don't have a lot of information about the actual young people that participate in the programs. Where do the young people live? Which young people are actually participating and which are not, and where are the gaps related to our actual young people? And that's because of limited data infrastructure that we had in the city, where individual level data between institutions was not able to be shared due to legal challenges. And that's where the Baltimore City Youth Data Hub comes in. Because before the Youth Data Hub, partners were unable to readily share individual level data between each other, which meant that there was a lack of understanding of who is and who is not being served by public institutions, and also a lack of data infrastructure that centers community and youth voices and experiences. And this conversation happened in more than just the summer space, right? This happened in the workforce space, early childhood space, you name it, where folks were just hamstrung by the ways that they were and were not specifically able to share data. So we created the Baltimore City Youth Data Hub to fix that problem and allow agencies to share data with each other. And it's been a very, very, very long road to get here. Dr. Marshall mentioned that we passed legislation back in 2022, but this journey started a long time before that. So the first real big conversation that happened about needing a data hub was way back in 2015, almost 10 years ago to today, which is just wild to think about. But things really didn't start heating up until 2017, where we realized we didn't want to reinvent the wheel. There are plenty of integrated data systems around the country, and we can learn best practices from those folks. So we joined a learning community from the Actionable Intelligence for Social Policy group, which is out of the University of Pennsylvania, AISP. They are absolutely fantastic. And received a lot of technical support from their advisors, but also the other folks in their network that have integrated data systems from Iowa to Broward County in Florida, Pittsburgh. They're all over the place. Once we did that, we were very intentional about spending the necessary time needed to build buy-in, not only with our public and private stakeholders, but our community as well, because we knew that data has been used to harm communities in the past, and we want to make sure that we weren't part of that problem, that we were part of that solution. So in 2018 and 19, we established several different partnerships and work groups to build a shared vision and guiding principles that have guided our work, which I'll share in just a moment. And then 2020 and 2021 was all about building the legal structures and the legal landscape to actually allow this to happen, because how this works in many other places around the country as they build a series of memorandums of understandings and data sharing agreements between institutions. And it seems like that was the way that we were going to go here in Baltimore City until essentially we hit a roadblock. We spent hours and hours and hours in meetings with lawyers, and I'll say for the record, love lawyers, got no problem with lawyers, but it's a lot of hours and a lot of conversations, and kind of being a fly on the wall when lawyers disagree is definitely an interesting experience. But it essentially came to pass that we weren't able to go that route because there were massive concerns that the Maryland Public Information Act, or the MPIA, would not allow. It didn't allow data sharing in the first place, and it also, memorandums of understanding and data sharing agreements wouldn't cut it to get past those restrictions, which meant that we had to pivot in the middle of a pandemic to getting legislation. So the legislative route wasn't our main goal when we started at all, because we wanted to get up and running, but realized, like, okay, again, when we talk about buy-in and community with our partners, this is something that our partners wanted. So we worked with them to go to Annapolis and make it happen. And we're lucky that we have such huge champions in the work at city schools and at the City of Baltimore. We had Dr. Santelises was a huge supporter. Mayor Scott testified to Annapolis legislators. And happy to say in 2022, legislation that established the Baltimore City Youth Data Hub passed, which is really, really exciting because it allows us to do the work. I wanted to share some of the guiding principles again that I mentioned that guides our work, because as I mentioned before, we know that both in public and private institutions, data can be and has been and will be used to harm our communities, specifically our Black and Brown communities in Baltimore City. And in 2019, our work group and community members and stakeholders developed these 5 principles to guide the use of our implementation and operation. The first of which is that high quality data analysis requires an understanding of historical context and competence. And I can probably speak for a full hour on just this one alone, because there's a lot of meat that goes into that one. But I think some of the important parts is to recognize that community needs to be central to this work and acknowledge the harm that data can do, but also realize that while our legislation allowed for the sharing of quantitative data between our institutions, the qualitative data needs to be central to our products as well. The stories and the experiences of our young people and community needs to be a part of every single product that we share. To that point, second is that the transparency and community trust building are priorities of data use, governance, and sharing. I mentioned that first conversation started in 2015. Our legislation was passed in 2022, and we started integrating data for the first time just last fall. And that takes a lot of time. And one of our phrases that we say a lot amongst ourselves is that we go fast or we go slow to go fast, meaning that we're intentional about knowing that it can take time to build all the structures and partnerships that you want to make sure that this is equitable, make sure that this is sustainable, and that this is something that can really improve lives for our young people. It also means that when we talk about data governance, community needs to be directly involved. And I'm going to share a little bit more about our community governance model and exactly how we do that in the Baltimore City Youth Data Hub. Third is that the Data Hub will focus on improving systems level challenges. It will not focus on individuals. And what that means is that while we're integrating individual level data, we are looking at systems level changes. This is not a case management system. Not to poo-poo on case management systems. They definitely have their part and are helpful to directly target and help individual young people that need assistance. But our goal in our wheelhouse is about systems level changes and bringing data together and then analyzing them in the aggregate to better understand and inform policies and practices. Fourth, again, we're very direct that the data in our hub will highlight and work to eliminate racial disparities and inequities. And of course, confidentiality and privacy is of utmost importance. Data use will be ethical and enforce high standards of privacy. Throughout the legislation, I'm happy to share the link if you want to read. It's great bedtime reading. Trust me, legislation. We were able to embed these 5 values kind of throughout the text. And in some ways, even though we really weren't going for legislation when we started this process, now in a way there's a blessing in disguise is that we have something codified into law that includes our values that's sustainable for the future. So I mentioned our community governance model. How does the Youth Data Hub actually run? There's 3 main prongs to how we operate. In the middle is that the legislation calls for a non-governmental manager of the Data Hub to oversee the day-to-day operations. So that's us. That's Baltimore's Promise. That's our main role, and one of my main roles as the director of research as well. We have our executive committee, and that's comprised of the mayor of Baltimore, Mayor Scott, and Dr. Santelises of City Schools, and we meet around 2 to 3 times a year. And those meetings are open to the public and advertised on our socials and our website. We have our data oversight committee, and that committee is made up of data and programming staff from the institutions that provide data, so that the public institutions that do provide the data have a direct means of being involved in how their data is used, but also they're the experts of their own data, both the successes and the challenges. We meet monthly, and we've been able to have really deep conversations about again, the best practices of data collection, of data equity, and already am seeing some improvements in the future. And then, as I mentioned, since this is a community governance model, one of our big 3 prongs is called the Community Research and Action Committee, or CRAC, which is comprised of community members, including young people, that meets monthly to increase awareness of and provide feedback on the Youth Data Hub. And I'm going to explain a little bit more about that in just a moment. But first, I wanted to talk about our data oversight committee, because it's just a wonderful group of people that really care about young people in Baltimore through their different institutions. And at first, we only had in this committee data staff, the folks that are handling the data on a day-to-day basis in their agencies. And we kind of realized, like, as we were trying to dive deep into our first use case, that a lot of things were like, oh, I need to get back to the programming people on our staff because I know kind of the data, they really know what happens in these things. And we realized, like, let's just bring them in, right? So we have data and programming staff, and they're able to kind of feed off of each other, which really helps everyone's understanding of what is happening in our city and what is happening in our combined data collection efforts as well. Something we are extremely proud of is our Community Research and Action Committee. These are 14 incredible Baltimore City residents that are on our community governance model. And because this is a youth data hub involving youth data, we wanted youth to be directly involved too. And half of our Community Research and Action Committee members are young people between the ages of 16 and 26. They have multiple roles. They were inducted for the first time just last June. So we're still building up and kind of like figuring out how this all works. But their many roles include thinking about what questions the community has that they want to answer through this youth data hub. What are the best questions that we want to answer, and they're also helping ensure that we're telling the right stories and narratives and bringing the right perspectives and experiences into our data products as well. They'll be central to that. They're also going to help us facilitate conversations with the wider Baltimore City community, because while these 14 incredible individuals are amazing in themselves, we don't think that 14 people can represent the entire great city of Baltimore. So they will help us reach out to wider conversations around the city as well to talk about data. And just as we don't want to silo institutions, we don't want to silo our institutions from our community as well. So we're bringing our community and our different prongs of our governance system together all the time to have collaborative conversations and strategy meetings. And this is a picture from a great meeting that we had in City Hall the other day, where we brought our groups together to really have collaborative and community-driven conversations about our data ecosystem in Baltimore. So something I wanted to share with you all, one, to give myself a minute break to take a sip of water, but also something that's really excited is that through a recent grant that we won, we were able to kind of produce a video to better tell the story of our youth data hub. The full video isn't going to be released until another couple weeks from now, which is just around 4 minutes, but I did want to share a teaser just so you can get a better sense of like, who are the people that I'm talking about? What do these spaces look like? So if I can not mess up the tech, I want to show a little teaser of this.
What I love the most about Baltimore is the people. Baltimore City Youth Data Hub is an integrated data system. We're collectively working on behalf of young people in Baltimore. We each collect information about young people in Baltimore.
When folks feel like they've invested and been a part of the research, they use it.
It seems simple, but it actually is groundbreaking work.
We all fight for the same thing.
The people who are most impacted have a seat at the table. What if we look at the education and see how we can break those barriers?
Everyone should be a part of the Baltimore City Youth Data Hub because it will be able to answer questions that we currently are not able to answer.
I love the waving. Hi everyone. Yeah, so it's really, again, part of our organizational values to bring people together, to convene stakeholders together, to have the conversations and to bring the data together in order to drive actionable change for our young people. And as Dr. Marshall mentioned, we've been getting some national attention from our work. We recently received a grant from Made for Health Justice, which is out of the de Beaumont institutions. We were de Beaumont Foundation. We were one of four communities to receive this opportunity. This one in Pittsburgh, Tucson, and Portland, to create a data ecosystem that centers health equity and racial justice. We've been highlighted in the Center for Regional Economic Competitiveness for how we're bringing communities together, and we're receiving calls all the time. We were at APHA. I met Dr. Powell there, which was a lot of fun. And I think it's interesting because there are integrated data systems that exist around the country, and we're able to network with them to learn about where we are growing in our capacities in terms of like infrastructure and governance and things like that. And at the same time, they're coming to us with like, how does this whole community thing work? Because we're always trying to break down the barriers that not only can community be involved with this work, but young people are perfectly capable and indeed necessary to be centered in this work as well. In just a recent community research and action committee meeting that we had an incredible conversation between one of our 16-year-olds on our committee and the assistant deputy mayor about the curfew during the summer. And just like a difficult conversation that existed between those two, but one where they kind of left with more knowledge about each other's experiences and a better idea of how they wanted to use that knowledge to better the experiences for young people all around, which is what this is all about. So this is a slide that we actually presented to our executive committee last year, which is where we believe that we are poised to help Baltimore win. After years now, almost a decade of planning and discussing the Youth Data Hub, we are fully operational. We are integrating data. We do have our committee structure in place, and it's a major win for Baltimore because we have community-centered data access and use. We're able to get actionable insights. And one of the key parts of the logic model too is better data quality because our different institutions that exist in the city have loads of different levels of staffing capabilities, of infrastructure capabilities. So for example, one of our agencies that was collecting information about who was participating in their programs wasn't collecting birthdays for their participants, which when you're trying to integrate data, is a huge need because a lot of John Smiths around here. So together, these advancements means we're building a better, more informed Baltimore that can act on the insights we gain from this data. And I want to go full circle in that I talked about our summer ecosystem at the start and how we had limited infrastructure on that. And our first use case that we're working on right now is on summer, and it's called the Summer Engagement Ecosystem. And specifically, we're going to be able to identify gaps in data quality amongst institutions. Since this is the very first time that we're actually integrating data, a large part of the product of this first time is just figuring out what do we even have in terms of the infrastructure of the city. We care about the things like the unduplicated counts of young people and the demographic characteristics of program participants that are represented and underrepresented. But and we know already from looking at it that there's just gaps in what we're able to get due to data collection and data quality issues. So we're providing the support and the capacity necessary for institutions to improve their data collection efforts. Looking ahead in the short term and actually looking behind, because last month we had what was called the Summer in December gathering. It was actually super cute. We had like snow cones and like umbrellas and beach balls, and it was freezing outside. But a lot of fun where we brought all of our committee members together and different institutions in our summer systems coordination group to reflect on past summers in Baltimore and really gear up for this summer engagement ecosystem release coming soon. Our data integration is final, which is so exciting. We've been talking about this for so long, and like, yeah, we're real. We've integrated individual level data between institutions in the city. We're sharing our initial results with our committee members late spring with a plan of a public release for this first use case in the fall of 2025. Looking ahead in the longer term, yes. We still have some gaps in the data that are available to us. So the legislation allows for sharing between us, Baltimore's Promise, between the City of Baltimore and city schools. It does not currently have state agencies, which means that we're missing out on the Department of Juvenile Services, on child welfare data, on a lot of data that is housed in state institutions, which means, for example, our ability to better understand how we are and are not serving youth that are in the juvenile justice system is limited. So we plan on our entire staff actually was in Annapolis yesterday meeting with legislators, not just for this, but for our wider strategy. But next year, we're planning on amending the legislation to include state agencies and other nonprofits as well. In the longer term, we plan to open research and data requests to external partners right now. To external partners, right now, our priority is building something sustainable and allowing our community and our internal partners to address the questions that they want answered. So we're going to continue producing multiple products to inform policies and practices. The other use cases that we're planning on working on aside from summer engagement is around post-secondary pathways, around kindergarten readiness, and there are a couple others that have already come up. So we're always going to prioritize our internal partners, but we definitely want to include a process for external partners to be able to use our system for good as well. All right, so how can I help? How can I get involved? Like my wonderful colleague Bridget Blount said in the teaser that I showed, everyone should get involved in the Baltimore City Youth Data Hub. So how do we do that? One thing that I want to mention is that we are hiring on our team. We have 6 positions open right now. Those applications close on Friday, and those 6 positions are across our organization. 2 of them will be on my team. We're hiring for a data analyst and a senior manager for the Baltimore City Youth Data Hub to help bring us all together. But we also have positions in the Career Bound initiative that I talked about as that is expanding. So please share, apply, ask me for any questions. We are required by legislation to produce an annual report, which we don't need a legislative requirement for because we want to be able to share with everyone what we're doing. So we released that annual report early in the fall. So take a look at that to better understand what we're about. As I said, executive committee meetings are open to the public. We would love to have people attend. The next one is going to be sometime in March. We don't have a date pinned down yet. You can imagine that's very difficult to do with getting on Mayor Scott's and Dr. Santelises' schedule, but our website will and our socials will have that information. On our website, you can sign up to receive our quarterly newsletter for Baltimore's Promise to learn about all the great things that we're doing at our organization. And of course, let's continue the conversation. I love reaching out and I love hearing ideas from folks and just sharing a little bit more about what we do. And I know that there's amazing things happening over here too in the School of Public Health. So yeah, james@baltimorespromise.org is my email. So hope we're doing okay on time because that's what I got. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much. So we'll start with questions from students, if there are questions, and then we'll turn it over to everyone else. I can start with a question.
Yeah.
Can you talk about folks' reactions to incorporating the values into the legislation? I know our center has some core values, and there have been times where folks don't think about that being involved in sort of research, and so I could see the same thing in data. So just how folks took that in terms of incorporating those values into the legislation.
Yeah, if you're thinking about folks in terms of like the city of Baltimore and city schools, they demanded it just as we did. They've been, again, huge champions of this work, and the folks in Mayor Scott's administration and the wonderful people at city schools, not only Dr. Santelises, but Chief Teresa Jones who's the Chief of Accountability and Assessment at city schools, has just been really challenging this data hub to make sure that it really instills those values of community governance. So that wasn't the difficult part. I think some of times it was how to exactly like word it right, because I'm no lawyer. I didn't draft the bill. So how do we build our capacities within our institutions to pass this legislation, which really helped having Mayor Scott testifying to folks. It was also what the legislation actually requires is an advisory committee made up of community stakeholders in the city, which is what we're able to write down. And we decided to take it a step further. That's not just an advisory committee, but it's a group of folks that have decision-making power to determine what we do and do not do. Yeah.
Fair question. Go ahead, we can start in here.
Thank you so much for the presentation. I was wondering if you could share more about how you disseminate the data with youth? For example, like could they go onto the GIS system and the website and look for programming that's available?
That is a wonderful question. We try to tackle it in a couple ways. One thing is that we try to share our information publicly on our website for people to access and interact with. One of the challenges in that, right, is we work right now with Tableau, and we're moving to Power BI and ArcGIS. Not necessarily the most mobile friendly applications, and we know a lot of our young people access information on their phones. So that's a challenge. So what we typically do is hold different workshops, different sessions where we invite our community partners to come attend. What we found really successful for young people are data walks, where we have like big posters and poster boards of information that we've collected of just the data, right? And we asked our young people, okay, how are you interpreting this data? What is this data telling you? And I think one example that really helped frame that and change kind of our thinking was we collected literacy data on city schools through a certain test. And when we showed it it showed that literacy rates were very low. But one of the things our young people said is, oh, I know that test. Nobody cares about that when we take that. It's a joke. So it's basically telling us like the quality of this specific data isn't helpful. And if we didn't reach out to our young people, we wouldn't have ever known that. Before I mentioned when we talked in focus groups with our older youth about programming, okay, we know there's a lack of programming, but they gave us the additional information that even the ones that do exist are inaccessible for X, Y, and Z reasons that we never would have been able to know without talking to it, which is why in our organization we know that quantitative data is often prioritized in these kind of research, but it's the qualitative information that is really going to get you a lot closer to the action needed and the mechanisms needed to improve outcomes. So I think that was a tangential thumbs up. Okay, great answer.
Online?
There's no more students, okay.
Oh, they're online.
Online.
I'm gonna let Aja, do you want to unmute and go?
Sure, thank you. I really enjoyed this presentation. And one of the things that I keep thinking about is you've mentioned several times how data has been utilized by people in power to harm communities. And I know that in Baltimore, it sounds like you had a lot of support from politicians who are interested and share similar values. And I wonder, in terms of sustainability, we all know some of the trends that we see happening in the country. I'm wondering how, inside of your process of safeguarding the data that you have, how were you all thinking about if the current political situation changes in Baltimore? Not saying that it will, but how can your intentions to be protective of the data continue given different political circumstances? And then also, I know you mentioned that you're also a part of a collaborative, and I'm wondering in other situations where they don't have support of the politicians or the political climate is much different, how they have tried to carry the same values, if that was something that any of your partners in the collaborative were dealing with.
It is such a great and timely question, and right, things are moving extremely and worryingly fast, right? Was it just yesterday or this morning that DEI officials in all federal agencies were placed on leave? So I think for us, some of the protections are in the legislation itself that, like, by law, data can't be used for certain metrics and without the consent of certain parties. So there are some protections there, but I think tangentially related to your point is that how do we create something sustainable that isn't sustainable based on the specific individual that's in power? And we've been thinking about that a lot. And one of the practices that we've had about that is that since we started the conversation about the Baltimore City Youth Data Hub, we've had 4 different mayors come through the city. And think Mayor Scott's is the first one elected to second term in something like a couple decades or something. So it's rare to have this kind of stability in the city. But even when the election was happening, right, there's some like contingency plans that has to happen. How do we keep this alive? If a different mayor comes in, how do we advocate and use our partners to enact change? And I think part of that is helped by the intentional years of work that we built good faith between all sorts of different information and partners. So there's a lot of advocacy and trust for this work that helps us along the way. Your other question, which is about how do other sites across the country think and work around terms of equity is so poignant. I think we are big fans and big friends of folks from Broward County, Florida, and they've been dealing with this issue a lot because we are able to intentionally and directly say, right, we're about race equity, we're about dismantling systemic racist things that have happened in our public and private institutions for years. We can say those things and they can't in public for sure, right? In any institutions because they're in the state of Florida and that isn't allowed. So they have strategies that they can use to get towards that, but it's limiting and it's hard, and I can't answer for them, but there are definitely really good people in states across the country that are able to overcome these challenges to still use data to increase equity and provide communities with the support that they need. But it's difficult. So I think, we're thankful that we have a system in Baltimore where we can do that and champions within different organizations in the state of Maryland as well. But sustainability is always on our mind. So no, I appreciate the question a lot. It's timely.
Thank you.
Okay, really great, James. So fun to hear about this. I just have a question about how are you all deciding, especially Baltimore's Promise as the manager of this, what your priority needs are? So I know the data is going to be released. I imagine when people start hearing more about this, you're going to have, oh, look at this, look at this. How do you go about, what is the process? I know there's community, all these people involved, but they must have different competing interests as well. So I was wondering if you have any.
You just do all the things all the time, it's just really easy. Next, no. When I realize that there's chats that I haven't been reading. Okay, thank you so much. Part of it is that we have approved use cases. The first 3 use cases have already been approved. So we have a schedule of just getting started off. What are the first products we want to do? And those we didn't come up with ourselves. Those came after. It was part of the years of work right back in 2017, 18, 19. So the first one was summer engagement ecosystem, almost because it was important and we know that there was a lack of infrastructure there. And it's also a low-hanging fruit. It's a way to get our foot in the door because we had a lot of access to summer programming data that was just itching to get together and better understand. The next 2 are post-secondary pathways and kindergarten readiness. But if there's a need from a city partner or a different agency, we want to fill that need as soon as possible. There are potential collaborations where if our community research and action committee isn't okay with something, it will likely not happen. When we open this up to external researchers, we don't have a process completely finalized, but we've talked a lot about how we want to look at how we want to do this. The application process itself will ask external researchers, how are you adhering to our guiding principles? How are you ensuring that this doesn't get hidden in a journal article and a CV without actually helping our young people? What are you doing to help, just like y'all are doing at the Center of Adolescent Health through the Grads to Careers work? And the data oversight committee, the data partners, and the community research and action committee is going to be the ones that say I think this is helpful, or I don't think this is really, I don't think this is it. This isn't, I don't see this as a need. I don't see this as helpful. Do not trust this project or not, and work from there. So there's still a lot of kinks that need to be sorted out. But we're really excited. I feel like this is a new beginning for us where it's been almost 10 years again to get to this point. And now okay, the next phase is how are we going to get operational with multiple projects at the same time? And one of the reasons why we're hiring right now is to build the capacity for us to do that. Hey.
I am impressed and really excited about your commitment to transparency, like through like online annual report. I'm wondering if there are conversations in the figure you show with all of the involved partners about sharing information that's just not positive, right? Like I don't suspect that you'll find all good things all the time. And so I'm just wondering how that will be navigated. And I don't know if you can go back, I don't know if you, it seems like you are partnering with organizations that work with youth or on behalf of people, maybe that one, yeah. But I didn't
Bless you.
see GPD. And so I was wondering if that would be included at some point.
They're not a direct data provider right now,
Okay.
and we do not plan on sharing individual level data with our young people with BPD. There is
Will you
room.
ask them to- Or I guess we can get this publicly.
Right. So we're thinking about that, right? But we want to be extremely careful about how we do that for reasons. But to your point about kind of positivity and negativity, we're not afraid, especially in just the infrastructure conversations, right? We're going to have like recommendations to different folks that say, like the infrastructure is lacking here and the data collection is lacking here. And this isn't a F- on a report card. You guys think, what are you doing? It's a like, hey, if we want to collectively work together to involve young people, these are the steps that's going to need to take. And again, I think part of that work is when people get this information from these institutions, they're not going to be surprised, right? They've been deeply involved and centered in these conversations about where we're going on a monthly basis, and then bringing that back to their teams themselves. So it's not a surprise. It's almost like, okay, how can I use this information to better support?
Like those conversations, like, this isn't the thing we want. How do we move forward? Like
Right.
that kind of strategic planning by site or by different
Yeah.
age group. If those are the types of conversations that also happen.
It's very intentional. And we're not just meeting with folks as a group all together, but also my colleague Alejandro Perez, who's the director of you met him in Minneapolis, the director of data infrastructure and integration. We're having one-on-one meetings with folks too to make sure that they're involved, they're in the know about what's going on and what's coming. So yeah, I think we're not going to shy away from difficult conversations at all, but we also know that we're having a difficult conversation with a stranger isn't going to help anybody. So it's the partnership and the trust in the community and building together that we know is going to actually build a good faith to improve outcomes moving forward.
Maybe has a question, Annie Smith on the chat, which I'll just read for you. It says, I really appreciate the data hub's focus on using individual level data to drive systems level change. I'm curious if you also collect organizational or systems level data, for example, types of programs implemented, participant compensation practices, reasons of anti-discrimination policies, etc.
Yes. So absolutely. And that data is data that we already have. For example, in the summer systems table, we have most of that information, including like our programs free or not, do they provide stipends and whatnot. So in our, let's see, I skipped over a little bit because there's just so many bullet points, but for the like specific project questions that we have for this very first go around of the summer engagement ecosystem, we're asking about the number of youth are participating in our agencies, multiple programs in our agencies, the types of programs youth are participating in. So part of that integration is, bringing in the program level to those individual observations, if you will. And I think there's something else that I wanted to say to that, if I can remember, but I probably can't. Is that since this is the very first time that we're integrating this kind of data, you'll see that like a lot of these are kind of landscapey, descriptive, surface level, and that's intentional because it's hard to believe right now with how cold it is outside, but a summer is coming, and it comes every single year. So this is going to be an iterative process, and it's going to get better every year, not only the data quality, but our ability to ask questions like, what is the effect of attending a YouthWorks program on high school attendance the next year, et cetera, because those are the kind of quality questions that we want to get at as well. to better see like where our policies lacking, where they're successful, where they can be transferred over. And it's also a point that we can advocate for more funding as well. It's also a useful development tool. Thank you, Annie. Great question.
Thank you so much.
Thank
for being
y'all.
with us.
Thank you.